Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create the red blocks that you see on the screen. These red blocks could be called the core and the cavity components for something like a coupler that you might want to build so that you could hold the scanner. And what's unique about those blocks is the cutout on the inside of the blocks perfectly aligns with the shape of the handle. Okay, so how do we go about doing that? Well, let's go ahead and close this assembly to get it out of the way. Now, I already have the scanner part open. If not, you would want to open your part to which you want to build a core and cavity component set. In this case, we have it open, so now I'm going to go to File, New, and create an assembly that's going to import or have that scanner as its centerpiece. So I click the scanner, I'll click the check mark, that brings it in. When I was looking at the scanner earlier, I noticed that when I viewed it from the top view, it wasn't sort of aligned the way I wanted. So in other words, you can see this edge here isn't vertical, and I wanted that vertical, or the lens on the front isn't horizontal. So in order to fix that, I'm going to right click on the on that component and tell it I want to float that within the context of this assembly. Okay? That means I can now move the part around anywhere I want. Now I'll start building some mates into this assembly. So the first one I'm going to do is I clicked on that face that was the lens, and I'm going to click on the front view of the assembly itself, and I'm going to say let's make those two parallel. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to align the origin of the assembly model with the center of mass of that scanner. Now you can display the center of mass by going to the heads-up toolbar visibility icon and clicking on View Center of Mass, and you can toggle that on and off if you want. But in this case, I just want to mate that center of mass with the origin, and then I'll do that as a coincident mate. Now my part is almost fixed in space the way I want, but it rotates, as you see, back and forth, right and left. So I need to prevent that rotational degree of freedom. So now I'm going to click on the top plane of the assembly and the top plane of the scanner and say let's align those or make those coincident. And at this point my part is now stable and it's aligned the way I want. If I go back and look at it from that top view, this line is now vertical, the lens is horizontal, everything's good. So let's go back to our trimetric view. And what we want to do at this point is we want to insert what will become those red blocks that we saw at the beginning. So that means I need to insert a new part into this assembly. Unfortunately, Insert Components is looking for existing parts. Luckily, there's the down arrow that says New Part, so I can select that. And then I can go to my feature tree, and you can now see I have the assembly model with the scanner, and now there's a new part. In this case, it's called Part 2. I can right-click on that new part and tell it I want to edit that part. But before I do that, I should probably save. So let's rebuild, and let's click Save. Do a Save All. Comes up with a name, so we can just call this assembly scanner, and I'll just give it a name like core cavity. A long name, probably too long. Let's just get rid of the words. Let's just do core and scanner, core and cavity. Okay. And hit save. Okay. And it was asking me whether I wanted to save the parts internally or externally. I just let it default to what it was. Now I'm going to go and edit that new part. And I can tell I'm editing it because notice the text is now in blue on the left side of the screen. At this point, I want to sketch in this new part because I need to create those square blocks that you saw in red earlier. So I'm going to click on Sketch and the Sketch button. And then for the plane, I want to sketch on that right side. So it rotates my view. Now let's do a corner rectangle. We'll draw it from about there to there. And let's fully define that. So we'll give it some dimensions. Let's make this 60. These round numbers. And I made it probably too wide. So let's make it maybe quite a bit less. Make it 80. And then I need to shift this line over. So let's go from the origin to this line. Let's make this like 25. I need to get it over quite a bit. Yeah, that looks good. And then this corner's hitting the trigger, so I want to lower this line down. So instead of 7, let's cut that in half, like 3. Okay, now we got our fully defined sketch. Done with that dimensioning. You can look and see that sketch I did is right down the middle of that part. So that's cool. So now what do we need to do? We're going to create a feature of that, and we're going to do an extruded boss base mid-plane, because again, if I rotate the part, you can see mid-plane extrusion will give me the block with a material on both sides of that handle. So I extruded it about 60. You can see that by looking at the part, or I can go, let's go back to our trimetric view. Okay. Now here's the fun part. How do we get that inside of the block to be removed that equals the outline of the scanner? Well, that's a nice feature built in the SolidWorks. I can go to Insert, Molds. It's part of the Mold Tool functionality. And there's a selection called Cavity. It then, on the left side of the screen, it asks me to choose the component that's going to define the cavity. That's the scanner. Underneath that, it has a thing about scale parameters. Okay, now in my case, we could just keep everything at 0, no scaling. But I'm thinking about using those blocks to clamp onto the scanner, and I might want to have a rubber or silicone gasket in between those. So I actually do want some wiggle room in there if I don't have that gasket, which means I want to expand the scanner by, let's say, 4%. So it's larger than it really is and makes the cutout on the blocks that 4% larger size. And so I'll just say OK. And now, as soon as I hit OK, did you see what happens? The part turned translucent that was the scanner, and I've got that cutout of those blocks. So the only thing left to do now is save the block as its own independent part, and I can easily then do a extruded cut to make one side, save the block again, do an extruded cut to do the other side. So let's do that before we run out of time. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go to File. Since I'm editing that part, I could right-click on it, or I can go to File, Save As, and it says, okay, it's being referenced by other documents. Save As will replace those references with a new name. Is that okay? Or check Save As Copy to Save As to, check Save As Copy in the Save As dialog if you wish to maintain external references. Then I would want to do that. So I can say Save As Copy and Open. So now I've got Part 2 Scanner. I can rename this to maybe be something much simpler for that part. I'll call it Left. Okay. Now I can go back up, save as again. I get that same message. I don't need to read it to you again. Save as, copy, and open. And you, I'm sure, figured it out already. I'm now going to call this one right. Okay. Now I've got this. Now let's go back to our model. Actually, let's save our assembly. Let's finish editing that part. So we know we can uncheck it there. Let's save our assembly. Let's close this assembly. And let's open up those two parts we created. So we're going to go File, Open. Remember, they were called left and right. We'll just do one of them because we'll run out of time. Okay. I lost the part there. Sorry about that. Scanner 2. Oh, I made a mistake there. But I think you get the idea. What I need to do is cancel out of those. Cancel out of all these. There was the part, you saw it, but I had that extra stuff. So let's just not mess up too bad here. I'll click on either one of those. Oh, sorry. Should have said no. There's the part. Okay. You can see it. Now what we could do a sketch in this part on that right side. Let's just make a big rectangle because again we're going to run out of time in just a minute. Okay, and we'll do a feature. I won't even fully define it. I know that's totally wrong, but you can see if I do that, let's flip the side. Expand that extrusion. Say OK. Now we've got that piece the way we want it. Now I can, again, I better rename that one so we don't have this big issue that we were having before. Let's remove that 2 that was in there. Okay. So now we have that one half of the part. And we're just about out of time, so I won't do the other half. But obviously you can see how to do that. So I hope you found this video helpful. Sorry about the little glitches there at the very end, but it's all about this broken reference that I've got in there, but I can fix that later. Have a good afternoon.